You gave me the giggles, Drew. Hey guys, Tuna here from Tenkara Rod Co. I'm here today to give you a brief introduction to all the different types of flies. Today I'm going to talk about Kebaris, Nymphs, Streamers, and my personal favorite, Dries. There are lots of different flies out there. It can be a little confusing, so I'm just going to go through each category one by one, tell you a little bit about when to fish those flies and how to fish those flies. Let's get going with this. Alright, first of all, I'm going to talk about Kebaris. Kebari in Japanese simply just means fly. Kebaris are unique because the hackle is actually facing the opposite direction compared to most standard flies. The hackle points towards the eye of the hook rather than pointing towards the bend of the hook. Because of this, it gives the fly a lot of action, especially when you swing the fly or even twitch it to give it a little bit more action. You know, a situation when I would want to fish a Kebari is like right now. We just pulled up to this small stream. It's early September. There's not any bugs hatching right now. We haven't seen any fish eating. And so my go-to right now is going to be this Kebari fly. As far as the method for fishing these, you can dead drift. You can cast straight out in front of you and give a little swing. As you swing, these reverse hackles will fold back and pulse, which gives the fly a lot of action and can many times entice the fish to come up and eat. When you order a kit from us, it's going to come standard with 3 Kebaris. So now that I've got one tied on, I'm going to go show you guys how to fish it. Dry flies. My personal favorite. Dry flies are so much fun because you're fishing this fly on the surface of the water. So you get to see all the action. When that fish slowly comes up and sips your dry fly, it's like nothing you've ever felt before. Dry flies are very fun and yet can be pretty complex. You have everything from really small midges that you can fish as a dry fly, all the way up to big stonefly and grasshopper patterns like these. With dry flies, you want to make sure you have a good presentation. You know, pretty much the smaller the fly, the better presentation you need to have. So you want to make sure that that fly is landing gently on the water. You're not disturbing the fish or disturbing the water too much when your fly hits. Stoneflies, grasshoppers, you can be a little bit more aggressive. You can go ahead and kind of slap the water. Grasshoppers, when they hit the water, usually hit the water pretty hard, make a small splash, and sometimes that's what the fish like. In fact, even when a grasshopper hits the water, a lot of times it's kicking its legs and it's moving a little bit. So if you're fishing a grasshopper, don't be afraid to twitch it a little bit as you're fishing. Dry flies are cool because you've got aquatic insects that live in the nymph stage and eventually hatch and become adults or dry flies, and then they'll land on the water, lay their eggs to create more nymphs, create the cycle all over again, and fish will eat those bugs in the dry fly stage or nymph stage. You also have different dry flies that are land insects or terrestrials, like ants, beetles, ladybugs, grasshoppers, and those kinds of things. Dry flies are more of a summertime kind of thing. There are some flies that you can fish as dry flies in the winter, but pretty much when you're fishing big dry flies, you're fishing in the summertime, and that means life is good. So when you're casting a dry fly, I've got a good size hopper right here. You just want to make sure you have the right presentation. So, you know, hoppers are kind of big. They can kind of splat on the water a little bit. So I don't have to be real gentle with my cast. If you're fishing smaller dry flies, then you want to have a good delicate cast and a nice soft presentation as that fly lands on the water. Oh yes, that was cool. All right, next up, I've got tied on a small jighead hare's ear nymph. Now, nymphs are living subsurface. They are under the water. Most of the time, if you go to a river and you flip over some rocks, you'll find a whole bunch of small nymphs living under those rocks. Now, when it's time for those nymphs to hatch, they crawl out of those rocks, come to the surface, hatch, and become adults or dry flies. Nymphs account for over 80% of a fish's diet, so they are very effective. So don't be afraid to tie a nymph on when fishing is slow or you don't see any fish rising and situations like that. Nymphs are kind of fun to fish. You're fishing them under the water. Most of the time you're not seeing your nymph. They're so small, really hard to see. So you're mostly going off of feel. With some situations you can use a strike indicator, but most of the time with Tenkara, you're just kind of using a tight line method where you're keeping a little bit of tension on the line, trying to get a good natural drift with your nymph, but still keeping a little bit of tension so when a fish does bite, you can feel that, or you watch your line stop and you can set the hook. So in this situation, I got this little bull trout. I just casted it straight upstream, let my nymph dead drift. Like I said, they're very hard to see, so you usually can't see your nymph. I wasn't watching the nymph, I was just paying attention to the feel and watching my line. When my line stops or I feel and eat, just a soft set of the hook. And here I got a small bull trout. These bullywuggers represent leeches or really small bait fish really well. So like as a leech, I would just kind of jig it a little bit. So I'm just gonna bounce it. So this thing's kind of going up and down pretty slow. And you can really strip them kind of fast if you want, go a little bit slower if you want. The method is up to you. Just try and entice those fish to come and eat it. So this woolly bugger is kind of like one of the smaller of the streamers. I mean, this is, you know, an inch long or something. There's other streamers that are 4 or 5 inches long. Bull trout really like those bigger streamers. So it really just kind of depends on like what's in the system. There's sometimes sculpin in certain rivers. Fish really like sculpin, and those kind of have a big fat head on them, a little bit longer body. So just kind of pay attention to, as you're walking around, if you see a lot of small bait fish, sculpin, leeches, something like that, then you have a good idea of what type of streamer that you should tie on. The fun thing about streamers is they attract really big fish. You know, those bigger fish are usually looking for a big meal. If you want to catch some nice big fish, then you might not catch a whole lot of fish, but if you fish a streamer, you might get some really nice big fish. Alright everyone, thank you for watching our brief introduction on all the different types of flies. You know, I've really just skimmed the surface here. I could go into a lot more detail. So if you do have questions, go ahead and hit those questions in the comments below. We'll try and get back to you on those. I've been fishing for a long time, so I've just collected a lot of flies over the years. I have thousands of them. You don't have to have thousands of flies. You know, you start small and build your collection from there. My rule of thumb is every time I walk into a fly shop, I try to buy a few more flies to not only support my fly addiction, but also support the fly shop. So, thank you for watching, and if you guys have any questions or you want to find out more details, check out some of our other instructional videos, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.